Address on the present and future of real-time payments by Muzaffer Hamid. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was just looking at the session and saying, what an opportune time just after lunch to talk about real-time payments. But I promise not to bore anyone. So, in fact, just before we start, a quick introduction about me. I'm a career banker. And now have shifted to a different field, which is domestic payments, networks, etc. And I think the idea when I received this topic was looking at how over the years my career has changed with respect to payments. And then I looked at rewinding the clock and figuring out how I did payments before when I was in banking, in payments, and how it has changed over the course of the years. And what I noticed is that our consumers are becoming lazier, so which means that technologists in the room and in the industry have to become smarter. And often we look at different kinds of transactions in a very siloed manner. And I think the talk and the presentation is aimed at communicating the fact that this is not about just transactions, it's about much more than that. So I actually added, my ticker is not working, and there we go. So I added a theme to it, saying it's just not about transactions, it's about relationships and how we create and manage those relationships. I think more often than not, a lot of people believe that you can acquire those transactions over and over again while not maintaining a solid relationship between a sender and a receiver. More often it's a fling than a more formal kind of relationship, and that's what we aim to achieve. If you look at the big numbers, right? What does the present have? I think I'm fortunate to stand in a country where obviously is the birthplace of a lot of domestic payments, and nobody can talk about domestic payments more than what has happened in India. I manage a company in UAE, which is a domestic payment network, and of course, we always look at what developments have happened in India. If you look at across the world, we're talking about a lot of money that changes hands. A lot of countries in the world are participating in ensuring real-time payments domestically, right? Which is going to save a lot of money for governments and countries and consumers across the world. So you're talking about $200+ billion that will be saved while having real-time payments enabled in those domestic countries, right? However, this also leads to other situational problems like fraud and risk that arise with that. So the present is really something that tells us that the adoption of real-time payments domestically is widespread. If you look at this entire map across the world, you will see countries really adopting standards which the local consumers enable real-time payments between whether it's P2P or P2M, etc. Now, obviously, India is the lead runner in this, and we always look at it. However, I think when it comes to looking at it from an international perspective, there is definitely a need for a global RTP. And that's where we are missing out at the present time. And the fact that there are close to about 300 million migrants, which are all around the globe, the fact that a lot of money is sent across the border, especially from these migrant countries and into their domestic home countries, there is definitely a need, and hence, I guess the topic was very apt, that how do you take a domestic RTP and convert it into a global RTP? When we look at different ways and numbers that really matter, I think annual remittances are close to about 700 billion and increasing every month. More people are migrating to countries that provide better jobs, better facilities, etc. So all these payments lead to a hidden amount of money that lies within networks, and which I call, if you can look at it, about $10 trillion is locked up in networks. So this is where the absence of real-time payment, settlement, etc., will really enable them to have much, much better and easier and cost-effective thing to do. A large proportion of people also look at how they can move money from one place to the other without actually having the knowledge to do so. So obviously, the international migration has created corridors between different countries, and the flow of funds is across the board. And the need is really significant, because the way people move money from country A to country B is often defined by convenience, often defined by price, etc., where they don't really maintain relationships across the board. If I look at the evolution of the payment industry over the years, and I'm still in the present, I haven't yet gone to what we can do. So we've gone through a lot of stages of payment evolution, and it's really all about the experience. So when you talk to consumers today on why would they select one aspect or one mode of channel versus the other, it's experiential. And a lot of times now, and we can see it in young consumers, they really don't want to interact with different people, right? And this is my personal experience as well, that there's a store now in Dubai, in one of the malls, where you can actually go in, have an app downloaded of that store, card number registered, pick up whatever you want to buy, and then just walk out. And your checkout is done as you walk out with the item. So this is what is contextual or invisible payments, right? This is really where the market is heading. So contactless, all of those kind of payment aspects that are really a thing of the past. The consumers today really want to do very little when it comes to payments. And I think that is very important to understand. So experientially, how do you ensure that the consumers today are able to seamlessly move out, make payments, and enable themselves across the world, right? If you look at the journey again today, it is somewhat like my career graph, which is going all over the place, right? In fact, a lot of experience today is broken. And hence, even Mercury, the company I belong to, I head, our aim is also to look at this broken journey and of course have the opportunity to see how we can fix it and make it much better. If you look at the graph, the experience in terms of price, of what is expected by the customer is often different. And this is largely due to, the sender and the receiver not really having a relationship. I think the next couple of slides actually describe what the problem is. So if you look on one side, that's the existing sort of payment infrastructure that we will all be familiar with. And what I put on the other side is what really it should be. So I think there are plenty of people that have crept into this chain of sending money from one side to the other. And there is definitely a need to harmonize this. A lot of people are making unnecessary amount of money. And the only enablement, and we will talk about it in the next few slides, is how do we ensure that payments from the home country to the destination country go through as less number of hands as possible, and then have a way of actually talking around compliance, governance, and security. I'm always afraid of any regulators in the room, so I hope there are not any regulators around. Unless that the regulators back a whole change in this way of interaction between different countries, it is not going to be easy to adopt a very simple phenomenon. We all know you can't have a talk about future of real-time payments unless you talk about cryptocurrency. And I think that is one of the things that will definitely happen in the future. If you look at, in my view, humble view, that the future has to be interoperable. You have to have payments and networks talk to each other. Today, the only interoperable solution is a bank account, and people are used to this legacy type of arrangement and legacy type of frameworks around SWIFT, etc. Eventually, I think the catch-up will happen, and it's a matter of time when we will adopt new standards of integration between different countries, harmonize them, and lead to a more immediate and instant settlement. I think that is the key. How do you enable it? And this is, again, my take on how do we enable the future. Identification is a real challenge in the current scheme of things. So using concepts which have been used domestically, even by UPI, etc., on aliases or phone numbers, mobiles, etc. They are unique numbers, especially mobiles on the telco side. And telcos do this beautifully, by the way. And the way we go to different, we cross borders, our phones change networks, and we don't even realize that it has happened. We roam like home, as they call it. But when it comes to payments, it is very unique, and often we don't understand. So I guess account identification is really something that will drive the future. We're also talking about compliance and governance, as I mentioned. The whole idea that you can have tokenized compliance which can be shared across when the payments travel from point A to point B is where you build a source of trust between the sender and the recipient. And often there are a lot of regulations across boundaries, and once you build a source of trust in the network, and I think that's where it'll become easier for people to have payments across the border. I think clearing and settlement, which needs to happen instantaneously, is also something that will drive RTP payments, global RTP payments. This is done wonderfully in domestic networks all around the world, and people are used to doing this domestically. There is obviously a challenge when it comes to cross-border, foreign exchange, etc., but if you have a harmonized clearing and settlement, this is where it will take us to the next road. I think adoption of blockchain technologies and or cryptos is essential. This will really enable settlement in real-time basis. Eventually, as I said, it is definitely going to happen. And I think all of us are waiting to have some bit of a regulatory push. And that is really what is going to change the game as we move forward. I think that's all that I wanted to say. And I would be more than glad to answer any questions if you had. Yes, you had question? Yeah, please.
So I just wanted to ask that how Mercury is intending to position themselves for this change of present to future of payments.
Sure. I think we are blessed to be in a country that is really a fountainhead of a lot of origination of remittance to different parts of the world, right? Mercury, being a domestic payment network, is enabled across the country, where we control a large portion of these flows today domestically. We want to enable them across the border by different arrangements, and we are talking to different countries, their national domestic payment networks. The idea is, how do we have lesser hands touch the payment from one place to the other? How do we remove latencies as we see it today in the payments, and how do we make it efficient? Consumers today pay a lot of money to remit from one country to the other. And the moment you make it efficient and fast, that's where Mercury is all about. Thank you very much. Thank you.